All right, Kyle Wallack. This is an artist that loves AI. Hence, here we are, right? And we're going to get into a lot of really cool stuff. I was just making fun of myself, before we turned on the camera here about, all things street art that I love. And anybody that knows me, family, friends, and otherwise, knows how much I love this space. And I came across your art, inside of a feed of a mutual friend of ours, and it was a nasty piece that you had created with the Mamba mentality of Kobe. And I just said, who in the heck created that? And so here we are. And so, Kyle, thanks for joining AI with Alec. Can't wait to get in this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, here we go, bud. So, a couple of things. One, that New York Yankee hat means a lot to both of us. Your story is unbelievable, and it has New York roots. So I'm going to try my best not to jump in too many times here, but I'm going to kick things off with an open-ended question. So you had a very interesting situation develop during your first job as a graphic designer that led to you discovering an easel at some point during this process. And I wonder if you could walk the audience through what happened and how you stepped into this incredible talent that you've got as a refined graffiti artist.
Yeah, so interesting journey to put the spray can and paintbrush in my hand, but essentially, I was working as a graphic designer in New York City. I had a clothing company that I was designing for, and then I was kind of like bouncing around a couple jobs, graphic design wise. At one point, I was designing plus size women's bathing suits. At another point, I was designing posters for Teach English in Beijing. So a bunch of independent projects. Ended up, probably 6 or 7 months after I graduated, I ended up getting diagnosed with cancer of my parotid gland, which is right, it was on the left side of my face.
Yeah.
Two extensive surgeries, and, you know, couldn't really use the computer anymore because the surgery messed with my nerves and a bunch of stuff in my head. So the blue rays from the computer would cause me to throw up and get extreme migraines. So a day or two after my surgery, I was actually going back into my New York apartment, which was on 7th Street and First Ave in the East Village, and there was like a beautiful easel in the garbage, probably the $650 easel there in the garbage. So I grabbed it, brought it upstairs to my apartment, ended up giving my buddy a call and having him bring me some paints over. And, from there I spent the next 7 months inside just painting. So that's basically all I could do.
That's incredible. And I guess the next question is the robot question. Was there some like robot inspiration associated with that period of time? And again, the AI guy in me, of course, I love robots, so I have to ask that question.
It wasn't like connected to AI because this was 2017, 2018. So we were kind of not, I don't want to say before AI, but it wasn't as predominant as it is today. Robots were, looking back now, they were kind of a sense of like self-portraiting. You see wires coming out of their heads and their hearts and stuff like that. And that's kind of where I was going through pain at the time. And then it was interesting because I was at Endicott College, which is where I graduated from, giving a speech, and the dean of business, I had painted a robot for the college, and I had brought like some older robots with me that were from, the time period when I was inside. And he said it was so interesting that the robots from, when I was sick and painting looked like kind of frail and sad. And then the new robot I had painted for the school had its like chest out, and it was, kind of looked like a superhero. So, hearing stuff like that just makes me think that they're self-portraits. At the time, I don't even think I realized what I was doing. I was just kind of expressing myself, and that was the form it came in. And that's what I felt comfortable with. And now, looking back 6 years later, it's an interesting progression to see where the robots have gone. And now, with AI, I've done a collaboration with Coinbase and some people out in San Francisco, and we did a robot on the back of a jacket for the NBA All-Star game, and Franco Finn wore that. So it's kind of cool to see, AI and then the robots coming together, and all these digital spaces coming together, and then I just happened to have painted robots 6 years ago.
I love that. And my dog Winston, of course, loves it too. So he's going to jump right in. I'm going to ask a question real quick and press mute. So talk to me a bit more about sports and the role that plays in your art, because that's what caught my attention too.
So sports have always been a massive part of my life. Obviously, wearing the Yankee hat. Grew up with a pinstripe bedroom. Grew up with like the old Yankee cursive logo in my bedroom. Copying the whole lineup's batting stances growing up. Grew up like New York football fan. Just always infatuated sports. Always playing sports. Went to college and played lacrosse at Endicott. And when I started painting and coming up with my quote here for a period of time to create something that will last forever, I really kind of thought it was parallel to these sports icons that we have today or that we've had in the past, because not only have they created a career that's lasted forever and that people consistently talk about, like Babe Ruth still comes up almost every day. If you're a Yankee fan, Babe Ruth comes up. And I really just think athletes have changed culture. They've they've set high standards when it comes to the sporting space, and I think that there's a lot of athletes that I look up to kind of legacy-wise, and, they just have changed kind of the shape of the world and culture, and just, even changed the way the sport is played. Like, we're watching it with Patrick Mahomes right now. That guy's changing football in front of our eyes.
He's unbelievable. Let's go further, and I apologize to Winston, but this will be one of those fun moments in time. I'll edit that out. So I saw Jordan, I saw Iron Mike, I saw Judge, right? Like your stuff is so iconic and differentiated and awesome. And I'm not just saying that because I'm interviewing you. Hence, we're here having this conversation because I want my audience to see your stuff. So tell us a little bit more about the way you think about popular culture, whether it's music, sport, etc., and how that kind of influences your process, if that makes sense. Like, how do you think about these pieces? Because I look at them and I'm like, oh, those are awesome. So yeah, your process I think would be really cool to hear about.
My dog's about to start going too.
He probably hears Winston. They're going to go at it.
He's a little bigger than Winston though.
I can guarantee it. He's 16 pounds of fury. In his mind, he's a big boy, but he is a little dog.
I got 90 pounds right next to me.
He wants to be your dog.
Yeah. So super interesting. Like I said, I think sports and culture collide, and specifically with my Jordan piece. So a great collector out in Seattle collected that piece, and it's Michael Jordan shooting a Louis Vuitton basketball, and that piece came alongside Muhammad Ali with, his mouth covered with a lock on it. And I think those are two pieces that I really incorporated culture in, and I'll, tell you a little about that. Watching, we have Instagram, we have ESPN, we have all of these outlets to get sports media. We have, like the MLB app, we have all these outlets. And ESPN is covering athletes' outfits when they're walking into games. And that's not just in, NBA, it's always been a pretty big deal what they're walking into. But now it's the NFL, it's the MLB, it's what people are walking into the game with. It's, they're influencing the culture of what people are wearing. So that's where I saw the intersection of like high fashion and athletes was kind of through like mass media and how they're, like Russell Westbrook, they're like ranking his different outfits from the season and what he walks into. So that's kind of why I wanted to put Louis Vuitton together with Michael Jordan. You take like an icon in the fashion world and an icon in the sports world and you put them together because that's what's happening in front of us. And then with Ali, he's in jail, he's refusing the war, and he's, not really speaking. So that's where you see, him with the lock on his mouth, kind of representing that portion of his life. But then he also has a Louis Vuitton glove on because I was in a collector's massive collection in Wynwood, and he has an original photo of Muhammad Ali hanging out with Andy Warhol. And it's so interesting because those two worlds would never collide if they weren't in the space they were in. So, you know, that's kind of just where it comes from, you know, like the fashion and the culture part and trying to put those two things together.
I love that. And I think you're doing an exceptional job with it because, and again, I'm not just saying this because we're having this conversation, but the choice of the images that have inspired you, I can see like the Jack Nicklaus one. You know, just it gives me the chills because I'm not even a golf fan, but like there's something in our mind that just gets, you know, triggered when you see that as just a massive sports fan, which goes back to when I saw the Kobe piece for the first time. And I just think it's so cool what you're doing, and I know that my audience will feel the exact same way, which is, you know, a large part of why we're having this chat. But there's also something else I wanted to bring up that you and I spoke about that I thought was so cool, and it's so personal, I guess, to your process and so on and so forth. But so, you know, being dyslexic, right, comes with, I'm sure, just a lot of friction that those of us that don't have those challenges, maybe, you know, take for granted is probably an exaggeration, but we don't realize the challenges that you know someone with dyslexia faces versus those that we face in other ways and so on and so forth. And one thing you said to me when we were getting to know each other around this was, you know, AI has been quite helpful to you in overcoming some of those challenges and points of friction, you know, as someone with dyslexia faces, in large part that you can also now take that energy and instead of focusing on those other things that can be a little difficult, where you get to focus on the art, which is in everyone's interest. So could you talk to us a little bit about some of that kind of stuff that you and I spoke about with dyslexia and AI and your process and just some of the things that it helps you, you know, navigate that really make your life better and perhaps your work, you get to expand the surface area of how much time you spend doing the art, doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, dyslexia has always been a struggle of mine, specifically because I always felt like I can't like portray what I'm thinking in my mind because it's just hard for me to, you know, put it together in a way that makes sense. Like I remember when you first start doing 5-paragraph essays in middle school, you know, introduction, 3 body paragraphs, you know, or 4 body paragraphs, and then your outro. My papers looked a little different than my peers. My papers were just one long sentence, no indentation, nothing. And the substance of you know what I was trying to say has always been there, but maybe just not said in the way that makes the most sense. So AI has really helped me kind of just like put my thoughts together, help me with punctuation. And one thing I really like is, you know, when you first start using AI, it doesn't like know you. This is going to sound weird, but it doesn't know you. And then the more you use it, the more it knows like what you want to say and what you're trying to say. So, you know, the process has been great because if I'm trying to email a gallery and, you know, I want to reach out to them, show them my work, or we're just in talks about doing something, AI's really helped me with the process and like making it a lot quicker because I don't have to read an email for 3 days to feel confident to send it. And that was always a big struggle. It was like getting back to people late or just because I'm reading this email 3 or 4 days and like trying to make sense of it, but, you know, couldn't really put together what I was trying to say. And that's where AI, you know, I can type in what I would type in originally and then have to edit 5 times. I can type that in and then it can spit back to me a version that, you know, that I'm proud of and sounds, you know, better than my original version. And then I'm not editing it 12 times, you know, I'm editing it 2 or 3 times because it's giving me back exactly what, you know, I needed. And I think throughout history as humans, we've always had tools to make our lives easier. I look at AI as just another tool that we've created to help us. I mean, you know, there's always people that are going to be scared, but I'm not one of those people who's like scared of AI and thinks it's going to take over the world and stuff like that. I simply use it as a tool to help me. You know, even with reference photos for my oil paintings, one thing that, you want a reference photo. Not that I'm painting any type of photorealism, but you still want some type of reference photo. And you're coming up with these ideas, and usually you'd have to like get one of your friends to kind of pose in that way. Like I just did a series of these women sitting on wine barrels eating fruit. And instead of, going to my girlfriend or going to like my friend and being like, hey, could you sit on this barrel with these grapes and like hold them like this?
Just stay right there.
Yeah, I'm able to go into AI and get a photo, a realistic photo of someone that I can reference. And I'm not doing photorealism. I'm taking that photo and interpreting it in my own way. But just being able to type that prompt in and, kind of like getting to the nitty gritty and getting the right photo that I need for my reference has been awesome with AI.
I appreciate so much that you're saying, those things, and obviously you mean it. It's unfortunate that sometimes, folks, just that knee-jerk reaction in the creative community in particular is like, oh my gosh, AI is going to automate this or automate that. When instead, when you just look at it as a tool, man, like getting out of all that friction with email construction and all that stuff, or just compressing, your a dimension of your process. I just think that's so cool for you to share,
Yeah, it's almost, and it's almost like having, I like a secretary in a way, or, it's almost like having like a manager in a way where that can put everything together. And I struggle with organization too, and even it helps me with like organizing my weeks, what my weeks would look like, and it spits you back a PDF calendar that you can, instead of, I write a lot of things down, so instead of me like writing a checklist and like physically checking it off throughout the week, I can get a calendar and be like, oh, I have like this, like this scheduled for today, and various things that I want to, goals that I want to accomplish this week, paintings that I want to finish by my next show, painting series that I want to, have done by a certain amount of time, and just stuff like that. It just really helps.
Yeah, it's fantastic to hear, because I think, and maybe you could expand upon this as well, but I have some experience, within the creative community. And, one of the things, to your point, that I've always picked up on, with artists is that they just want to do the art. You know what I mean? They just want to be creative and do the stuff, right? And do the work. And it seems like there are different ways that AI, and we're in the very early stages of this stuff, right? But there's different ways that AI can maybe take some of that cognitive load off of your mind, so that you don't have to think about your schedule as much, or think about the email, or think about sourcing imagery when you already have the idea or the vision in your mind, but you got to move to that next level, and AI can help you get there. I wonder, is there something about your orientation to AI that other artists could be inspired? Because I imagine there will be a lot of artists, within my, follower base and network that are watching this, that, and I'm going to just take a stab at throwing it out there. I think a lot of people that are quote unquote fearful of AI are those that read about it versus use it. And I wonder if you maybe could speak a little bit to the artistic and creative communities around how and why you were able to step into it, and maybe give them some advice about doing the same,
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on like 10 different reasons why AI is good.
Let it rip. It's AI with Alec, man. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, so the first one is it allows you to hold yourself accountable. So that's one thing that's important, is like, if you, because as artists we have a million different thoughts and a million different things that we want to do. It's like, okay, I have one unfinished painting there and one there. I have 3 unfinished pieces of work, like going into this week, right? Monday, going into this week. I'm kind of figuring my week out. What does it look like? What days am I just going to be painting for, what days am I going to be in the studio for 12 hours versus what days am I going to be doing the business side of things? We'll just call it that. So, figure, wake up every morning at this time and put an hour or two into the business and then allow yourself to get into the studio. So that's one thing, is just accountability. It's going to give you a physical PDF of what your week could look like, instead of you having to spend an hour or two making it, of what you want your week to look like. And it'll take you 30 seconds to 5 minutes. And then it's up to you to hold yourself accountable on that. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is it's gonna make you push yourself, I think, if you use it the right way.
Nice.
am constantly reading art books. I'm constantly like trying to, just become better versed in art, just out of respect for, people who did it before me, and out of the need to continuously get better. So I think it allows you to kind of challenge yourself, because like I said, with reference photos, maybe there's things. When I went into painting the women on barrels holding fruit, it was a series that I was a little bit nervous to paint. I'd never done anything like that in my stint with oil paintings that I've been, kind of diving more and more into lately. But just having the confidence to have that reference photo and have that reference photo be the way that I want it, and that reference photo coming back to me in after I make tweaks and stuff in 10 to 20 minutes, that allows me to get that reference photo and then immediately the same day jump on the canvas, rather than, okay, I have this idea, I'm going to set up this photo shoot, and then by the time I actually get the reference photos the way that I want them, it could be, we could be a day or two or three or a week later, and that the juice could be gone by then. So it allows me to idea to canvas really quickly. And then if you teach like your AI thing, whatever we call these things, if you teach it the way that you want things, it's going to push you in ways that you wouldn't necessarily even have thought of in the past, because you can kind of use it and make, like, have it make you think in different ways. Or, hey, I really love like Picasso and Chagall, and then George Condo, and then but I also love artists like Shepard Fairey and Banksy, and different artists like that. And it allows you to discover other artists through that. Like, hey, these are artists that I have studied and I really enjoy. Who's some artists that I should study next? And, who's some artists that, maybe aren't on your shelves at Barnes and Noble? And, like, who's some artists throughout history that I can also look into and I can learn from them? And then, that's something that I have thought is cool. And you can also just, like, if you want to try something like watercolor painting, hey, obviously you learn, like, trial and error is the biggest thing in art, but you got to go into something with some type of knowledge. And I've never been a big YouTube watcher. Like, I don't really like watching like YouTube videos to teach me how to do something, unless my small engine in my lawnmower breaks and I gotta like get a visual on how to like fix the carburetor on my small engine lawnmower. But for paint, I just want a quick synopsis, like, hey, when starting watercolor paint, like, what's a great direction to go into? And then you can just read, like, a minute or two, and then, now you're, okay, well, I need this, this, and this to start, and now I'll go from there. So I just think it allows you to take Google and make it quicker.
I love that. That is a killer sales pitch, and will definitely be a big part of the micro essay and the podcast itself that I push out there when we wrap this thing up, because I think everything you've just explained, it reminds me of some of the conversations I had and you and I were talking about with Buff Monster, back in the day when I was in the LES, and when I first met him, he was down there doing his thing, and we got to know each other over time, and I just remember him describing on so many different fronts the type of work that he had to do, as an artist to run his, entrepreneurial business.
Yeah.
That he just didn't want to do, man. He's like, I just want to do my art, And I think there's so much truth in everything you just said about the way you're using AI And the good news is it's only going to get better from here, right? You're going to have literally an AI agent that's going to be focused on accounts receivable and your accounting. You're going to have an AI agent that's going to be gnarly creative and help you with inspiration and sourcing stuff. And you know, it can go down the list. But in order to get there, I think we need to hear from more artists like you that are stepping into it and that are using it. And I'm going to be certain and sure to send him this clip in particular and remind him of those conversations. And I hope he's already on his way with it, because all artists, I think, can benefit from this. And they just got to run at it a little bit, as opposed to, you know, maybe reading about it. And, you know, there's obviously some doom and gloom out there about the implications, which are just one collective segment's, you know, perspective on this.
Yeah, and I think the biggest fear that I've heard is, and my friend who's in medicine said this to me. He's like, "What are you gonna do when like AI's doing like they physically have AI painting oil paintings?" And I was just like, "Yeah, but that's not my painting. Like I'm still physically making."
Good answer.
My paintings. Like I don't care. They can make robots or AI. They can make them do whatever they want. It's, you know, there's like, yes, that their paintings will probably be beautiful, but there's still that human factor that comes with like making physical art.
So 110%. So, you know, there are robots that can play tennis, but I would never watch robots playing tennis versus the US Open last night and seeing the Joker overcome injuries to beat a 19-year-old that's half his age. It's like it's just it's the human stuff. And he's such a gentleman and a warrior afterwards. It's like, I don't, you know, all due respect, robots, like, find something else to do, you know? Don't do sports. Who cares? You know, I want to see the players play.
And yeah, and at the end of the day, we are making them to help us.
Yes.
Like they didn't make us to help them. It's the other way around. And it's just a tool, you know, you have a hammer to put a nail in, you have a screwdriver to put a screw in, and we just happen to make AI to do, we'll see what it does, but to do various things at this point in life.
That's it, man. That's it. I want to be cognizant of time here. So what do you got coming up that you're excited about? You know, where do people find your art to buy it and charge them a lot of money because you deserve every dollar, you know, but all that good stuff. Go ahead.
So things coming up here in Tampa at Dean Street Gallery. That's who represents me in this area. She's always got a couple cool things. I think we're showing some of my work on September 5th, that first Friday, which will be fun. And then working on a show in San Francisco in November right now that kind of puts, you know, the digital world with the physical world. So working on a show that is involved with one-of-one NFTs alongside of a physical painting that you will get. But that physical painting will only be able to be seen in full in the NFT, and then it might be covered in the physical forms. But, you know, we're working on that concept right now. So those are the two, you know, things that I'm working on right now. If you want to, you know, have a conversation or just purchase my art, you can reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn, or my email is kw@thekwgallery.com. And also Dean Street Gallery in Tampa. They have handle a lot of my work as well.
Right on. I forgot to ask you another question. You just triggered it for me, so yeah. I appreciate that. So I think you mentioned Coinbase as a killer brand that you did some collaborations with, and I know there's a lot of people in my follower, you know, kind of network or whatever, and the audience that are in the world of sport and entertainment marketing. And they work with lots of big brands and other emerging brands, and they're always trying to figure out really cool ways to do cool things. Is there anything that you get excited about when it comes to ways you can partner, or ways, you know, corporate brands, you know, that you align with could be helpful and beneficial to you, and you know, how you could collaborate potentially?
I think, you know, two people that, you know, have things that they believe in, when a conversation happens, I think good things come from that. So a lot of collaborations are kind of just like, you know, kind of like us, just getting on the phone and meeting each other and having a really cool conversation, and then it turning into something. So I'm always open to having conversations and, you know, collaboration if it is necessary, or, you know, if it works. So yeah, you know, there's always, I think in the sports world, they're kind of gravitating towards graffiti a lot, and I can see that just through like the quick, just the ads and stuff that they have within the sports world. So I'd love to do, different collaborations within sports, and I work with the Profluence guys. They're in my area a lot, so I was just with them at Golfology the other day. So that's kind of an ongoing collaboration that we have, just supporting each other. So I'm always here to have a conversation and see what comes out of it.
Right on. Well, this is perfect because there's about 50 people in my network I can think of off the top of my head that are going to be receiving a one-to-one message to watch this because
Awesome.
Your art is phenomenal. And I love the intersection between the street art and the gallery and sport and luxury and lifestyle and music and hip hop. It's awesome, man. So Kyle, thanks so much for taking the time. And hopefully we can do this again in the future.
100%. Thank you so much for having me, and this was awesome.
All right, be good and say hi to that dog of yours, the big dog, not the little dog like mine. I'll see you.